The ability to speak might not make you intelligent, but we're going to try to prove otherwise. This is the Clashing Sabers podcast. I am one of your hosts, Brandon, and I am here with my co host. He is the stormtrooper who got fired for continually hitting himself with a stun baton.
It's Davor.
Davor. We finally got the technology working. It feels like we're back at Clashing Sabers because we had tech issues to start the show.
Yes.
It's good stuff. Good stuff, and I'm glad to have you here and be talking about what we're talking about tonight, which is, of course, as you probably tell by the title, The Force Awakens.
Yes, I'm really excited about this.
It's going to be a really good time. At the time of this release, The Force Awakens came out roughly 10 years ago, which is just wild to consider. So we're going to do kind of a retrospective, kind of like we did for the Revenge of the Sith when it came out on its re-release recently, and just kind of look back at the movie 10 years later and see what do we think about it, how do we feel about it, and all of that good stuff. But Davor, before we get into that, man, it's been a couple weeks since we talked. You're always doing a lot of Star Warsing, of course, whether it's reading or watching or whatever you're doing, listening. So what have you been Star Warsing lately?
Yes, so what I've mainly been Star Warsing recently has been books. So I did finish up The Crystal Crown, and I've also
Okay.
read Master of Evil.
Oh, okay. All right. General impressions of Crystal Crown, because I finally finished it too, believe it or not.
I think I enjoyed it overall. I think what did I think on Goodreads I gave it a 4. I feel like
Oh, wow. Okay.
I feel like it ended pretty strong. Like it had its issues throughout, but I did enjoy the ending, and also I love Tessa Gratton, and I think like she's such a great character author, and
Mm-hmm.
so I think she does such a good job at like getting into the heads of Yord and Jecki and giving us those characters. So I don't know, maybe I give her some credit for that.
I think you do. I think you do. Well, we'll have to talk about that more on Don't Burn the Sacred Text. Maybe we'll have you jump on the Crystal Crown episode because I don't know if anybody else in the network is reading that book. Finally recorded with Amanda about Wayseeker, which was awesome. I looked at my notes and I wrote the notes 4 months ago. So that's how on it we were. But we will have episodes coming out about Crystal Crown and Bad Batch Sanctuary and all of that stuff here on the feed. So if you're not subscribed already, make sure you subscribe so you can catch all of those episodes as they release. But all right, you finished Master of Evil.
Yes.
I'm a little worried to ask this because we know what expectations do, but general impressions on Master of Evil.
Let me tell you, I'd give it 6 out of 5 if I could.
Oh,
This book blew me away.
we're talking Rise of the Red Blade level. Okay, continue.
Let me tell you, like to we're talking about Force Awakens tonight, but I'm gonna quote Luke and Last Shadow. This is not going to go the way you think. Like this is like you go in this and you're like, this is a book about Darth Vader. And like it is that, but it's also like not that in the best way. Like this book surprised me on like so many things happened in this book that I was not ready for. And it's really, really good.
Okay, so I'm 40-ish, 50-ish pages in. Loving it so far. I get the feeling and that this is going to be it's hard to explain. I kind of got this feeling with like Shadow of the Sith where I was reading the first 40, 50 pages and I was like, I know this is going to be a good book. I don't know how good it's going to be, but I know this is going to be a good book. And that's how I feel about Master of Evil is like, I know this book is going to be good. It's just a matter of how good it's going to be. A 6 out of 5. Wow. I was not expecting that.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting it either. I mean, I was looking forward to it. I love Darth Vader. I love Adam Christopher. But it's just like, man, I was really just, this book hooked me, and the characters are just so good. And like, yeah, again, like I think a lot of people will probably like have a particular prejudice feeling about it because like it's a book like it's about Darth Vader, and like we've gotten a lot of Darth Vader content, and people have mixed feelings about the Darth Vader content we've gotten because it is frankly a mixed bag as someone who's
Mhm.
consumed a lot of it. And it's like, do we need more Darth Vader stories, etc.? And I get all that. I had some of those feelings too. Like if it hadn't like initially when this got announced, like the fact that it was like written by Adam Christopher did a lot of heavy lifting to be like, okay, like I'd be much more meh on this book if it was anybody other than Adam Christopher writing about Darth Vader. But I went into it sort of looking forward to because of that factor, because of the Shadow of the Sith of it all. And man, I think he outdid himself.
Okay. Well, there you hear it, folks. That's Davor's review. We're definitely gonna have to have you on Don't Burn the Sacred
Yes.
Text for that one. I'm very excited, and now I'm even more committed to getting through this book in a timely manner because yeah, like I said, I'm enjoying it so far. I like the characters so far. I like the setup of the plot. It feels like it's going to be a very character driven story, which I always love. So excited to see where it goes. What have I been Star Warsing lately? Um, Man, I'll be honest. I've been like getting back into podcasts, like
Okay, nice.
listening to podcasts. I had kind of got a little worn out on it and just needed a little break. So I'd been listening to a lot of music. So thinking about that, and honestly, just getting excited to be in this time when we don't have a ton of Star Wars coming out, where I can just kind of enjoy bits and pieces here and there before we get the flood that is going to be 2026, which we'll talk about as we get closer there. But, Mando and Grogu coming out, Darth Maul, Shadow Lord coming out, all of this stuff, the build up to Celebration, everything that's going to be happening
Yeah.
is going to be huge next year. So I'm kind of in the waiting period for all of that to happen. I have been rewatching Stranger Things, which there is just it's not Star Wars, obviously,
Hmm.
but it's one of those things, to quote Yoda, it brings warm feelings to my heart to rewatch it, much like Star Wars. But it honestly has gotten me more excited to rewatch things like Skeleton Crew and stuff. Um, One, because there's obviously that, kids on an
Right,
adventure kind
right.
of thing, but also just like not having visited Stranger Things in a while. I got excited about like, wow, I'm gonna let Skeleton Crew. I haven't watched it since that release time. I've obviously watched the episodes multiple times, but not since that release portion era of time. I'm really excited to go back and revisit it because there's so much that I don't remember about it. So that's going to be on the docket here really, really soon because of Stranger Things. So not exactly Star Wars, but Star Wars adjacent.
Yeah. And I was thinking about Skeleton Crew recently and getting sad that we're never going to get more of it. And I was just like, man, I had such a good time with it. They're never going to
It's
make a
so
season
good.
two,
No,
but I
they're
loved
really
it.
not. It was like, I don't know if I've interacted with anybody who didn't enjoy Skeleton Crew.
It was
You
so
know,
good.
it was really, really good. And the fact that they're not going to give us more is really, it's upsetting. And honestly, it goes back to that conversation that we've had of like, what direction is Star Wars going in?
Yeah.
You know, Amanda and I talked a little bit about this on the Wayseeker episode of Don't Burn the Sacred Text. I'm just gonna plug Don't Burn the Sacred Text like 20 times this episode. So, and it was like kind of not necessarily that it was that anything was wrong with the book or anything like that, but it was one of those things of like, why was this book written? What was the purpose behind it other than just we need to put out content? And a lot of Star Wars can feel like that sometimes. Now, we'll of course see what Mando and Grogu is like. We'll see what Maul is like, everything like that. But Skeleton Crew didn't feel like we just have to put out content. It felt like
Yeah.
we have a purpose behind why we're doing this. And that is, I think, really impactful. And you look at successful things like Stranger Things, for example. They've taken years to do their seasons. Like 5 seasons has taken 10 years to do. But I mean, I'd argue season 3 is the weakest, and still, it's pretty dang good. And there's not really an episode that doesn't reach at least a certain level. And that's because they took time to really make it happen. And I just don't know if Star Wars has figured that out yet. And it's frustrating. And I hope 2026 is the redemption year where Mando and Grogu hits and Maul hits and all the books hit and everything is just working. I'm trying to think. Does Ahsoka releases late next year, right? Not in 2027.
That's at least what I've heard. I don't think
Okay.
anything's been officially said about when we're getting Ahsoka season 2, but I guess
Okay.
the thought is that it will be sometime next year.
So we've got that coming up too. Like, there's going to be plenty to talk about on the show, regardless of how it goes. But I'm really ready for like a revival in a lot of ways, and so we'll see if 2026 is able to be that. But as far as not 2026, but going back to 2015, almost 2016, um, I will never forget the date of The Force Awakens being released, or at least the day that I saw it, because it was the same date that I graduated college, just
Wow.
4 years later. So it was very like, oh, I'm always going to be able to remember this day. And what a day it was, man. What a day it was going to see The Force Awakens for the first time. Uh, I'll talk about my experience in just a minute, but for you, where were you at in your Star Wars fandom at that time? And what was that first experience watching The Force Awakens like?
Let's see. Where I was in my fandom is I think I was probably in I guess you could call it a lull in the sense that like I was still a Star Wars fan, obviously. I
Hmm.
enjoyed it, but particularly post the wrap up of the prequels, I hadn't really kept up with new content in the sense that like I was still a couple years out from being a Star Wars reader. I hadn't watched the Clone Wars movie when it came out, or wasn't watching like didn't watch the show when it was airing, or like Rebels and things like that. So I was still a fan, but like I wasn't as sort of plugged in as I am now with like books and podcasts and like all the TV shows and stuff. But then I still remember all the hype. Like I remember watching that. I don't remember if it was the teaser trailer, the first main trailer, like watching that on my phone when it dropped. I think it must have been the teaser trailer because
Mm.
I think it was that shot of the Falcon over Jakku.
Oh yeah,
And like
that Black Friday trailer.
yeah, it must have been that. Like I just I distinctly remember that hype, like all that, like the cross guard lightsaber, like that
Hmm.
shot that's not in the movie, and like there's been an awakening. Have you felt it? Like all that, and I definitely did get sort of like get caught up in that excitement of like wow, like Star Wars is back in a way that it hadn't been since Revenge of the Sith, since the prequels.
Hmm. Yeah. And then going into the movie and seeing it, like what was that feeling like?
Yeah, I think Force Awakens was I think it's the first Star Wars movie that I saw on release day in theaters, as best as I can remember. Like, definitely not with Phantom Menace or Clones. Maybe Revenge of the Sith, but also I don't think so. Like, but I know for sure with Force Awakens, I was like, get the tickets for the day of. I went to our local IMAX, like biggest screen you can see it on, and I remember just leaving and like I mean, like in the theater itself, like having a great time with it, and leaving the theater just being like absolutely pumped, like again that feeling of like Star Wars is back, and
Hmm.
having had like just a really really good time with it.
Yeah, I let's see. All the hype was wild. I remember like seeing Star Wars toys in the grocery store was
Mm-hmm.
just like a huge thing. I'm going grocery shopping and there's Kylo Ren and there's oh man, Zuvio. Wasn't it Zuvio? General.
The guy with the hat.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh man, there were so many of him. It was just really cool to be like, all right, yeah, this is back. Because for me, I've talked about this before, but like I kind of fell out of Star Wars for a while. Never like stopped liking it, but very much stopped keeping up with it in any way, shape, or form. Kind of like you were saying, and then the Disney purchase kind of happened right like I don't remember if it happened first or me getting back into Star Wars happened first, but they were very, very close to each other regardless. And I was just so excited that like there was going to be new Star Wars, and I was listening to Star Wars podcasts and just really getting invested in the galaxy again, in a way that I hadn't been since I was probably 12, 13,
Yeah.
when Revenge of the Sith came out, right? And I'm 20, 25 at the time. And so going, I mean, I still remember, I had my Darth Vader or my Kylo Ren beanie because it was cold out. I was actually wearing a long sleeve shirt, which I never do. It was like that that level of like detail, that I remember going to Alamo Draft House to watch the movie. And I remember too, like I I either ate before or ate after because I was too anxious to eat at Alamo Draft House. I was like, if anything ruins this movie watching experience for me, I'm gonna be really upset. And so I'm sitting in the theater, right, just by myself. I didn't go with any friends or anything because it's like there weren't any huge Star Wars friends in my life, and so I wanted to just experience this. And I remember just that Lucasfilm logo coming up, man. And I get a little choked up even talking about it now. That logo comes up and the crowd just erupts. And then a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away comes up and it's even louder. And I'm like, it was an awakening for me in a lot of ways of like, oh yeah, I'm never leaving this again. Uh I am in this for good. And it really, I mean, it led to it and Rebels, and even Rogue One a little bit, but mostly this and Rebels kind of led to the origin of Clashing Sabers because there was so much that happened in this movie that I wanted to talk about. I mean, you go back to, um, just the original stuff that we were doing for Clashing Sabers, just when it was just a website, and it's one of the first pieces I wrote was about Ahsoka in Rebels, and then there was things about Kylo Ren and Rey, and it was just such a compelling movie, and I think it has stood the test of time, and we'll talk about this a little more as we go, but it stood the test of time in a way that, um, I think all the good Star Wars movies. Well, let me rephrase that because all the Star Wars movies are good, but all the universally highly rated Star Wars movies do.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm gonna like. I mean, if there are any listeners who have also listened over to Space Swifties, we did an episode a little while back about where we were talking about ranking Star Wars movies and so on. Like, I'm just gonna put my cards on the table and say this is my favorite Star Wars movie. Like,
Is it
it
okay? Well,
is.
I've listened to that, but
Yeah.
I
Like,
forgot that.
it's
Yeah.
I don't think it's the best. Like, I think best and favorite are
Hmm.
different sometimes they overlap, but they're not necessarily the same thing. I don't think it's the best Star Wars movie, but is for me personally is my favorite Star Wars movie. Like, if I want to put on a Star Wars movie and like just have like a good time, action, adventure, like comedy, like all that because of Star Wars goodness, like I go to the Force Awakens.
That's very valid. I was kind of writing about things this morning, just kind of like sorting my thoughts out about what we were going to talk about, and I went to like in sports, you have the difference between rankings and power ratings, and rankings is like who's the better whose team has, or which team rather has like the better record and stuff like that, and has won in head to head. Power ratings is who would win on a neutral field. It's kind of like what betters use as a to make spreads. And man, it's really hard. It's easy to rank this movie wherever you feel it should be ranked, but it's hard to power rate this movie very low because you put it up against, like, you go like there's the sacredness of the original trilogy, right? But then you put it up against, you know, Return of the Jedi, and you're like, well, but the Jabba stuff, and then you put it up against, A New Hope, and you're like, but this and that, and there is a fight against every Star Wars movie there that The Force Awakens can win. and that says quite a bit. Um, for me, like those things that really like brought me into the movie, as cliche as it might be, was Ray and Kylo. So for you, what really like brought you into this movie and just like made it eventually become one of your favorite movies? Because it's those two for me.
Yeah, I think really it is like the strength of that whole main cast is really good. Like
Mm,
each of them individually are just really good performers. You get Daisy Ridley, you get Adam Driver, Oscar Isaac, all of John Boyega, all of them, like all individually are just like really good talents, but then also just the chemistry they have together.
yeah.
That the part in the movie that where I really like I start like I'm sitting in my seat and like my fist starts pumping and I'm like is that whole Finn Poe escape off the finalizer
Oh,
when
it's
when
so
they come
good.
together and then they're getting in the tide and they're escape like that whole like the chemistry between the two of them as actors is like so good and then like they're blowing up and he's like did you see that and I'm sitting in my chair I'm like
Yeah,
I'm
I
just like
saw that.
it's Star Wars, baby. Like that, like that's the moment where I'm just like losing it. Like they're so good, and then just like everybody else, and like Adam Driver, and the way that he sort of plays this very kind of tormented character, pulled in all these different directions,
Hmm.
and then Daisy, the way that she does sort of just like the earnestness and the conflict that Ray is going through, like all of them are just like really good, and they all just like play off of each other so well.
Yeah, yeah. The dynamics are insanely good. I personally have never been a huge Poe fan, just because he felt like a cliche. But there was that moment, that you talked about where him and Finn, and he gives Finn his name and everything. And even as I'm watching it, or I didn't feel this way as much when I watched it originally, but when I watch it now, I'm like, all right, cool. A little cliche about how he goes about giving him his name and stuff like that. But damn, this just feels really good. It just is, it's fun, and that's okay. Let yourself have fun. It's really really fun. So um that's really good. Speaking of like the beginning portions of the movie, I think we have to give credit really to all the introductions. But the two best introductions are absolutely Kylo's intro and then Rey's intro. I don't think there are two. I don't think there are any better intros in Star Wars. Period. For me, Rey's the best one.
Oh,
But
100%. Yeah.
I mean, even Kylo, the way that he, just walks down the ramp, very reminiscent of Vader, of course,
Yep.
and then that moment when he catches the blaster bolt.
Yeah. Let's talk about that for a minute. Let's talk about that for a minute. Like, it's easy now as like Star Wars fans because we've gotten we got there's two more movies after the Force Awakens, and then there's all the TV shows. Like, it's easy for us. We're now inundated with content. It's easy to be like cynical and want to. The moment when he stops the bolt, it's like
Hmm.
breathtaking. It's like
But it
shut.
was amazing.
He just goes grabs you. Like it's that moment in Star Wars. You're like, oh, I've never seen this before. Like what? What? Like what? It was crazy. It was
And then
incredible.
he just holds it there. That's the
Yeah.
wild part. Like to the point where when you're watching the movie, you almost forget he's holding it there until it like he lets
Let's go.
go
Yeah.
and it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. And so you're going, this is a character that has a different level of power than anything I've seen before. And he's not somebody to be messed with. He's not a Vader knockoff, even though to a certain extent, later the movie tells you that he is. For obvious purposes as the movie goes on, that is part of the point. But when you first get that, you're legitimately scared of this guy.
Yeah.
Um, I personally, and this is nothing against Oscar Isaac or anything like that. I personally think they should have killed Poe in that beginning scene, um, or at least somewhere in the movie, because I think if they kill him off in that beginning scene, and you get Oscar Isaac, and you just kill him in the first 5 minutes of the movie with your new villain, that just does another level of, it's like Drew Barrymore in
I was
Scream, where
just
you're
about
like,
to
oh,
make that
she's gonna,
comparison. Yeah.
yeah, she's gonna survive, and then just boom, she's dead. Um, I've never actually seen Scream. I just know the reference. I just know it from Pamela Anderson in Scary Movie. Anyways, enough about my childhood. But yeah, that moment was really great. But then, I mean, Ray's intro is another level. If you had told me we're going to introduce a character and they're not going to talk for the first 5 minutes that you see them, I would have been like, that's a terrible idea. And then they do it. And then they do it perfectly. And every moment works. And the music is epic. And the sound design, like the way that she like jumps around the Star Destroyer and you just hear the hollowness of it
Yeah.
and how reminiscent it is, and how it tells you like that's what her life is. Her life is hollow. Like she doesn't even talk to people because there's nothing to say. She's just stuck in this situation. It's really, really impactful. But I think the something I was thinking about earlier today is like it's just as important not what she says first, because obviously like she speaks an alien language first, but why she says the first things that she does. And it's to save BB-8. It's to
Yeah.
save this droid who she has no connection to and has no reason to save. And you learn everything you need to know about Rey in those first 5 minutes, in the silence, and then in the way she treats BB-8. Everything you need to know is right there. It's immaculate in every way, shape, and form. And it's one of those things, sometimes you're like watching a movie you've seen for a while or seen a bunch of times, and you maybe, pick up your phone to scroll for a second or check your email or whatever it might be, right? As soon as that comes on, not that I'm doing this with The Force Awakens because the beginning is just so good, but if that were to come on, that phone goes immediately down because you're paying attention to Ray's intro no matter how many times you've seen it.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with what you're saying. Like, it's so well done. Like, there's always that storytelling cliche about like show don't tell. Like, it's a whole
Mm-hmm.
exercise in just showing you. Like, it's that whole like George Lucas thing about like these are silent movies that you can watch without the sound,
I
and you
didn't even
get
think about
everything
that.
you get everything you need to get. Like, and it does all that. Like, you get this whole little vignette about the day in the life of Ray and everything that you need to know about her and her situation and what it's like for her on this planet is just conveyed to you through these visuals rather than any character or any person telling you anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's really well done.
Yeah, yeah, and that continues. I mean, throughout the movie, they don't try to stop and explain everything to you. They do a lot of showing, and we'll talk about a little bit like some of the detriments of the movie and some of the impact it had on the future films, that I think doesn't get recognized enough. But when we're looking at it in isolation, like it explains to you who Snoke is perfectly. He's the big bad now. It does it by making him this giant hologram, um, that just looks down on his minion, who he just casually mentions is the son of Han and Leia, as if it's almost dismissing it, right? And that could have been in another like I am your father moment, right?
Yeah.
But Snoke doesn't care about that. He's just he throws it away. Oh, your father, Han Solo. Like it he's not trying to keep it secret. Like Kylo's hiding behind that mask. He's not letting him hide behind that mask. He's going to expose who he is. That tells you everything you need to know about that character, right? The God, the mask actings that Adam Driver does with Kylo Ren. Like you learn everything you need to know by just the way that his body moves in that scene when he's talking to Vader's helmet.
Yeah.
All of it is just it's just it's the peak. All of these characters hit on every level, and as much as like for example, I think it could have been another I am your father moment if we had not known that Kylo was Han and Leia's son until that moment on the catwalk, right? But the movie doesn't go for shock and awe; it goes for good storytelling, and that I think is really powerful, right? Now, this is not knocking I Am Your Father. That works perfectly for The Empire Strikes Back.
Yes.
But if you had gone this whole movie without saying that, you lose all of that tension between Han and Leia. You lose all of that tension between Han and Kylo. That, like, even though they don't face each other, there is this push and pull, until they finally do meet. And you spend this movie, the majority of this movie, wondering, and really all of it, because you don't get the answer, like, this is Han and Leia's son, and how did this happen? And you just feel bad for him, because like, these two good people couldn't have possibly had this terrible of a kid, and you're spent wondering. And then he takes off his mask, and Adam Driver just does what he does with those, that beautiful man's face.
Yes.
And there you go, you've got everything you need to have, the character that has to follow up Darth Vader. You could talk about Darth Maul and stuff like that being, the big bad in Phantom Menace and everything like that. You can talk about Palpatine, but really Kylo is the one who has to follow up after Darth Vader. And you're never going to reach the level of Darth Vader, but you can get pretty damn close.
Yeah, I think like what we were just talking about Rey's introduction, then with Kylo Ren. Like, I think what this movie does really well with both of them, and really sets up, I think, for the larger sequel trilogy, is sort of this theme of legacy and sort of
Mm.
grappling with legacy. Because I mean, when we go back to talking about Rey's introduction, like, one of the things that does sort of it sets up that theme visually of showing, like, she's literally living within the ruins of the last war, right? Like, she is like,
Mm-hmm.
she's scavenging these Star Destroyers, she's living inside an AT-AT. So like, her whole life is sort of built on the scrap, the wreckages of the last fighting between the Empire and the Rebels. And then you move to somebody like Kylo Ren. Like, he's also sort of dealing with sort of the legacy element of, he's the grandson of Darth Vader, and he wants to be as strong as Vader, but he doesn't. He's still feeling the pull to the light, and he's not really sure that he can commit 100%. And so there's that sort of tension, and then that sort of theme ends up kind of going through all the other two movies, where you get to Last Jedi, and then you're dealing thematically about, like, what's the legacy of the Jedi? Like, is it failure? Is it, like what is it? What's going on? Do we even need the Jedi, and so on? And then you get to Rise of Skywalker, and then you deal sort of with the legacy of the darkness, and you've got Palpatine, and like Rey is his granddaughter, and all that. Like, is she going to pick up the mantle? Is she going to sort of reject that and carve her own destiny, and all of that? And so, yeah, like, this movie lays all that kind of foundational work there, particularly through those two characters.
Yeah, and you can even look at, Poe and Finn. Finn carrying the legacy of really both the clones and the stormtroopers,
Yeah.
and then Poe carrying on the legacy of the rebellion, in who he is for the resistance. And then, in subsequent materials, we learn who his parents are and stuff like that. I do want to talk a little bit about, you brought up the other movies, and the biggest failure I think The Force Awakens has is how it set up the other movies. I or I shouldn't say failure. I think it's the most worthwhile critique of the movie is how it sets up The Last Jedi and the Rise of Skywalker. Now, if you've listened to this podcast for probably even an episode, I love The Last Jedi, right? But it does, The Force Awakens, or the things that Last Jedi is critiqued for most often, Luke running away and isolating himself, the answer to Rey's parentage, all of those things. It was set up by The Force Awakens.
Yeah.
And I do think there is a valuable critique that The Force Awakens sets up a lot of things that it never planned on paying off. You can even look at Maz going like a great story for another time. You know, that is kind of the critique of the movie is that like it sets up a lot of stories that it doesn't later fully or satisfyingly pay off for some people.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder. This gets into a conversation that like I don't enjoy having about the sequels. Which is like, was there a plan? Because I have all thoughts about that. Like, but and then the question is like, is that the fault of the Force Awakens, or is that the fault of sort of like subsequent decisions that are made? Because you get like, I'll just give you an example. Like here's, I mean, there's like a couple examples, but you get like, even you, Master of the Knights of Ren, right? Like you get the Knights of
Mm-hmm.
Ren drop. You see them for 3 seconds in the Force vision that Rey has. And so, okay, you're getting set up with like, okay, the Knights of Ren are, we don't know what they are, but there's some teas like they're important. Kylo leads them, so on. Then you get to Last Jedi, and Ryan's sort of like, I'm not really that interested in the Knights of Ren. Like, I'm gonna go like do this other, like, which again, fair. And he like, I'm not knocking, I'm not dunking on Last Jedi here at all. Like, I really like, I love the Last Jedi, and it does some really cool stuff. Like, but then you get to the third act. It's like, okay, well, we tease the Knights of Ren, and it's like, well, like, what are we gonna do? Like, just never bring them up again? Like, and we got to bring them in, but you only have one movie to do anything with them, or with the sort of background of Snoke. So it's like they're probably, again, if you like wind the clock back to 13, 14, 15, when all this, like, there was probably a plan. Again, I don't like talking about the plan, but like there was probably a plan to pay all that off, and then other creatives made other decisions, and then you got to kind of iteratively build off those decisions, and you can't quite do what plan A was, and then you got to come up with plan B, and we got what we got, for better or worse.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is like there clearly wasn't a plan. Um at least like even for JJ. Like he didn't have answers to those questions to then hand off to Ryan. And then if Ryan goes and does something different, but like Ryan said like, "Hey, I need R2D2 there. Like, can you put R2D2 on Octo for me?" And then, JJ changed that. So we know there was the ability to communicate and make these changes, but I don't think, and you can kind of look at his track record, of things. I don't think JJ makes things with the interest of like, what's the answer? There's the oft talked about mystery box, that he has. And that's fine if that's the way he wants to create stories. But it's not the way you create a trilogy, right? Now, when we're looking at what we're looking at, which is The Force Awakens in isolation, like it doesn't need to deal with any of those critiques because for what the movie is trying to accomplish, like I said before, it tells you everything you need to know. It's just like when you put it in the larger context, and you can say this about all three of the sequel movies, so this is not a unique critique to The Force Awakens, but when you put it in context of the larger trilogy, the movie stops fully working. Now, that said, I do think when you put it in the larger context of the trilogy, The Force Awakens is the one that still holds up the best. As much as I like The Last Jedi, The Force Awakens still holds up the best as far as what it stayed true to as far as what the story was going to be. Yeah. So, all right. So we move along in the movie. And this one really is Han Solo's like movie. Before we got Solo, there was The Force Awakens. Um and we never get the legacy characters back together again. Personally, I'm okay with that. I understand and I can hear the critiques of other avenues, but getting to just spend a lot of time with Han Solo felt really, really good. And him being the mentor was like, maybe it should have been more expected, because of what we got in the teaser trailer and the trailer with, we're home and stuff like that. But for me, especially when you start the movie talking about Luke Skywalker, I didn't expect the movie to focus on Han Solo as much as it did. And I gotta say, he was the perfect character to be what these upstart rebels needed. Like having Leia in there too much, I think would have been overplayed at that stage. Definitely bringing Luke back in any way other than what they did, I think would have been a mistake for the movie. What did you think about like Han being our kind of original trilogy touch point throughout this movie? Yeah, your volume's just really low. No, you're still pretty. Keep going. There we go. We're back, baby. Tell that to Conja Club.
Original trilogy Han,
Mm-hmm.
when you first meet him and all that. But then you also get to see, some of the ways that he's kind of grown and changed and all that. Like the whole monologue that he gives about like, I thought the Force was all mumbo jumbo, and then I went through this, and like it's all true and all that. Like that's really great. And you talked about a little bit about it, like the way that he sort of this becomes this mentor figure for Rey, and he kind of develops this soft spot for her really quickly. And then also just you kind of see the conflict, like the fact that he's, as we talked about before, like he's gone through this very difficult thing with his son turning to the dark side, and then that resulting in his and Leia's marriage falling apart, and he responds to it in a very sort of Han way, which is to just kind of run away from things and kind of try to go back to his old life. And yeah, now he's trying to kind of find his way back in, and then just like a lot of that, especially like that earnestness with him and Ben, like that moment he shouts Ben, like that, like the first time watching that, it was so powerful.
My God, dude. Speaking of moments that hit.
Yeah, that hits so well. And yeah, like just their whole conversation on the bridge, like I think Harrison really delivers.
Yeah, no, he 100% does, in every way, shape, and form. For somebody who people have talked about for years, was checked out by the time of Return of the Jedi and
Yeah.
hadn't really been interested in Star Wars or anything since basically since 1980. To come back in the way that he did was absolutely amazing. And we got to talk about that moment on the catwalk because it's one of the most powerful moments in the movie. Which is saying something because we really can go through this movie moment by moment and really dissect and digest everything even 10
Yeah.
years later. Like we're not going to do that in an hour-long podcast, but like it's very doable. That scene with the way that he touches his face and what we see with Adam Driver and the way that he plays the you know I know what I have to do but I don't know if I have the strength to do it. All of that stuff is like it's so cliche to say it works, right?
Yeah.
Because you got to explain why it works. But sometimes there are just moments in movies, in storytelling, that just make you feel something and you feel it in your very bones. And that's what this moment does. You put two, like, Star Wars is known for like bringing in unknown actors and giving them credibility and making them into who they become. Well, here you've got two actors that didn't need to be made.
Yeah.
They were already made. And you put these two powerhouses together and you were bound to get something good. What amazes me is that 10 years later, you can still watch that scene knowing everything that happens now, and it still just works.
Yeah, it's so good. I remember, being in the theater, and like you have that moment of silence there where like he's holding out the lightsaber to him, and Han is grabbing it, and then this all the sounds are like there's no music, there's no audio,
Mm-hmm.
and you're kind of just waiting. And I'm sitting there the moment feeling like I think I know, like, but are they actually gonna do it?
Yeah, 100%.
And then he does it, and it was like it was just like it was, I mean, that again is like something that's another moment that we can talk about in terms of like taking for granted now and like expecting, but like
Mm-hmm.
like it genuinely was to kill off Han Solo. Like that was a bold move of this movie to do that.
It was a huge risk.
Yes,
A
huge.
huge risk. Like, it could have ruined the whole movie for people if you hadn't set up things the way that you did. Again, going back to creating those new and compelling characters, to what we talked about with naming, Kylo Ren as Han and Leia's son early in the movie, so that you have that time to feel that tension between them. If it had been just this momentary thing of like, I'm announcing that I'm your dad to the audience and then you're going to kill me, you lose a lot of that tension. So I think there are a lot of critiques of J.J. Abrams when it comes to his Star Wars movies that are valid and should be considered. As much as I enjoyed both The Rise of Skywalker and The Force Awakens, you cannot really knock the fact that him and Lawrence Kasdan took a lot of thought and pains and effort into their decision to kill off Han Solo. You can tell that in the way that the movie was made, in the way that they really bring you up high to like drop you down low. It's a real, I talk about this with the Last Jedi a lot, about how much of a roller coaster it was for the first time watching the movie. But like, if you think about a roller coaster and it going up to its zenith and then dropping you down, like, that's the Force Awakens. It makes you
Yes.
feel so good, and then it like drops you down so hard, which is exactly what it's designed to do. Right? You need
Yes.
to feel like Rey is the only hope by the time she's walking to um, the Jedi steps on Octo. You have to feel like if she doesn't get this, if she doesn't bring Luke Skywalker back, like, everybody's screwed. And you really feel that way because if Han Solo can't survive this movie with everything he survived,
Yeah.
you know, and you even have the weight, for fans that are aware of like legends and stuff. You have the weight of like, well, I've seen Han survive all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And you're telling me like his kid just kills him off in the first movie after Return of the Jedi? Like, what the hell? Um and so I don't think, as much as I think there are, the aforementioned critiques of J.J. Abrams, like, you cannot knock what they did in setting up this moment, because this is the moment that everything, it's the fulcrum moment of the movie. Like, if it doesn't work, nothing works.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, we were talking a few minutes ago about the ways that The Force Awakens is sort of retroactively somewhat hurt by kind of the, decisions made and like the subsequent two movies. But like the way that, for example, like this scene is like added onto by The Rise of Skywalker, kind of revisiting it
Mm,
on Kef
yeah.
Beer and then giving Ben that sort of moment to make the right decision. And then you go back here, like that just like adds so much, that adds even more to the moment when you go back to Force Awakens and you watch it again.
Yeah. Well, and especially because it had been kept so well under wraps that Harrison Ford was going to be back.
Yeah.
Nobody knew. The first time you see that, you're like, what is happening? It was pretty shocking just to see that. And just as it was shocking to kill off Han Solo here. And one thing that amazes me about all three of these movies and the sequels, and this is just a little side tangent, but like, you kill off one of your main trio in each of the movies,
Mm-hmm.
and each one works perfectly.
Yes.
Like, obviously, like the Carrie Fisher situation made it really, really difficult, but the way that they handled that, like, was perfect. And if it had been Carrie Fisher actually doing that, and that had been how they killed her off, like, that would have still been the perfect way to do it. Luke's is the perfect end to his journey, right? And Hans here is, while it's like, it's not ideal, like, it it's the perfect setup for what comes in the subsequent movies, right? The tension between Rey and Kylo in The Last Jedi centers around her watching,
Yeah.
the patricide of Han
Absolutely.
Solo. Then you get to what you mentioned about, Han Solo returning to on Kef Beer and all of that stuff. Um, it really, I honestly don't know if I've ever sat and thought about it as long as I have right now, about how important that singular moment is to the movie. Yeah, there was a you mentioned it, but there was a feeling throughout the theater of like they're they're gonna they're gonna do this. They're actually gonna do this, and then they did, and it didn't ruin the movie.
No,
That was that was amazing, and I think that that shouldn't be overlooked.
agreed.
So, all right, we've covered like literally like I feel like 10 minutes of this movie because it's again there's so much that we could talk about and continue to look at. But 10 years later, how has your impression of The Force Awakens evolved?
How has it evolved? Um I mean, I already said, at the top of our conversation, like it's my personal favorite Star Wars movie. I think, I mean, I agree with what you started talking about earlier in terms of like it it has elements in it and like it sets up things that sort of sit a little awkwardly with the subsequent two installments. Again, just because
Hmm.
of how decisions were made and then attempts to kind of double back and all of that. But I still think like I still love it a lot. I think it is. I think it is a great. I think it is both a great movie on its own, and I think it's great in terms of the sequel trilogy, in terms of really sort of setting up what the trilogy is about, both in terms of
Yeah.
like the kind of the main characters and the conflicts that they're dealing with, and then a lot of the kind of big thematic things that run through all three of the movies. And yeah, I just think about it. I mean, like maybe admittedly, like a little bit nostalgically, like I get there's a little bit of rose
A
colored
hundred
glasses,
percent.
but like I do think about that. Like I do look back and think like, oh yeah, like the time 2015 Star Wars was back and like people were so much more pumped and it was like the before times, even though like it really wasn't. Again, it's like there's the nostalgia element, like it was before like people got like divided and like poo-pooed and cynical and like mad about Star Wars all the time. And again, like that, like those people were still around there in 2015, and so like that's but it's like it's
Yeah.
just like it has all that like all that like aura around it in terms of like just the kind of mainstream culture, like everybody knowing and talking about Star Wars and being excited about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, this is it's hard because like I have the nostalgia elements for the original trilogy and the prequels where like it becomes hard for me to like rate or rank anything above those.
Yeah.
But as I was kind of like trying to place it this morning, again, like every time I'm like, no, it's not high enough. No, it's not high enough. No, it's not high enough. And so it's not my favorite Star Wars movie. But it is, I think, the best of the sequel trilogy. And I think as much as I love The Last Jedi, as much as it is a nostalgic personal favorite of mine, if we're talking about the best of the sequel trilogy, I think it's undeniably The Force Awakens, regardless of the nostalgia element. And so it deserves all its flowers. I do wish that they had done a 10 years later re-release. I doubt we're going to get that because there hasn't been enough marketing time for it now, but maybe we'll get it at 15. We just got to wait another 5 years. I do wonder if like the Mando and Grogu coming out thing affected
Could
this at
be.
all, with but that's another conversation for another day. Regardless, The Force Awakens, I have come to love it more since uh honestly, you want to know what it was? It's been since Star Wars Celebration.
Okay.
Um that I really started to really appreciate it more, and it was watching it with Drew and his family. I think it was the first time that I walked his kids. We were staying together, and I walked his kids down to the hotel lobby to pick out a movie, and they had The Force Awakens, and they picked that. We were watching it together, and Drew and I are talking, and kids are playing and whatever, and I'm just like, God, I freaking love this movie. I hadn't
Yeah.
watched it in a minute, and it just hit me in a way. And since then, it's just continued to rise up for me. So 15 years from now, or excuse me, 5 years from now, we'll probably talk about the 15-year
Mm-hmm.
anniversary. A couple years from now, we'll talk about The Last Jedi turning 10 years old. But regardless, there's going to be a lot of Star Wars conversations that we're having here. I think our next episode is going to be a look back at this calendar year, with, of course, maybe a little look ahead to what's coming in 2026. All of that is going to be available in the feed you are listening to or watching us on now. So make sure you are subscribed, whether it's on YouTube, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, whatever they call it now, Spotify, Zencaster, wherever you're listening to us. Make sure you subscribe. Also, if you don't mind, it's the holiday season. It's the season of giving. I'm going to ask you to give two things. One, give us a rating and review. Go over there, give us a rating and review. It helps the visibility of the podcast, helps people find us and what we're doing. And really, Davor and I, we're going to sit down and have these conversations regardless of how many people are listening. The real reason we want to have people listening to this podcast and watching our channels and following us on social media is for our nonprofit, where we put Star Wars books into classrooms across the country. You can see behind Davor thousands of Star Wars books. We want to take some of his books and give them away. No, I'm just kidding. We want to go buy some Star Wars books for kids and go send them to them. But we need you guys to be able to do that, to go donate over on patreon.com/clashing sabers. You get free content there, or extra content there rather, when you donate. And 100% of that money goes to buying and shipping books to kids. We've got, so many issues with book bans happening now and people taking books out of classrooms. We're going to put books in classrooms. It costs you nothing if you want to just go over to clashingsabers.net and nominate a teacher. Takes you 5 minutes. I take care of everything else. The teacher doesn't have to do anything other than tell me what grade or what kind of reading level their kids are at, and then I take care of the rest. So it's really an effortless, seamless process for everybody involved, and it really has a high impact on the students in the classroom. So help us do that. Go over to patreon.com/clashing sabers, or even better, go over to clashingsabers.net and nominate a teacher for that. Davor, if they want to find you, whether it's on the aforementioned Space Swifties or on social media, where can they do that?
All right. So if you want to follow me on social media, I'm over on Blue Sky at Demondum. You can also listen to me as a co-host over on Space Swifties, a Star Wars and Taylor Swift podcast that I host with my wife, the one and only Meg Dowell.
And we'll have every link you need in the show notes. I do think we need, before we go, to talk about one thing that really, look, I did say earlier the biggest critique of the movie is how it affects the other movies and stuff like that. I got it wrong. And I need to apologize before we close out, because really what this movie is missing is Batch 8.
Hi ho.